Chapter 1. The Cabin at the Edge. Trevor Lennox drove deeper into the foothills than he'd planned. The gravel road narrowed into a winding strip of dust and stone, hemmed in tight by towering pine and spruce. Overhead, the sky sagged heavy and gray. Clouds pressed low like a warning held just out of earshot. The GPS had long since given up. The map on the seat beside him was useless. Half the roads weren't even marked anymore. But still, he pressed on. The Hartley cabin sat at the very edge of the old forest, miles from the nearest neighbor, tucked into a shallow valley where mist pooled like forgotten breath. Trevor's tires crunched to a stop at the clearing's edge. The cabin stood about 50 yards ahead. Small, dark wooded, hunched against the tree line like it was trying not to be noticed. A thin curl of smoke rose from the stone chimney. A single porch light flickered behind a sheet of drifting mist. Trevor cut the engine. The silence was immediate. No birdsong, no rustle of wind. Only the faint ticking of the truck cooling beneath the overcast sky. He stepped out onto the damp gravel, boots sinking slightly into soft earth. The smell of rain hung in the air, sharp, metallic. Ahead, the cabin door creaked open. A man stepped onto the porch. Ethan Hartley, mid-30s, gaunt, with the look of someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. Behind him, a woman, Marla, hovered just inside the doorframe. Younger than Ethan, hair pulled back tight, arms folded stiffly against the cold, or against something deeper. They didn't wave, they didn't smile. They simply waited. Trevor grabbed his notebook and recorder, nodded once, and walked toward them through the heavy mist curling low across the ground. He already knew. This wasn't just another story. This was a wound still bleeding, and somewhere in the woods behind the cabin, he felt it. Something unseen, still watching, still waiting. Chapter 2. The Couple Who Wouldn't Tell. The porch boards creaked under Trevor's boots as he approached. Ethan Hartley stepped back instinctively, his hand brushing against the doorframe like he was ready to retreat inside. Marla didn't move at all. Her arms stayed folded tight across her chest, shoulders locked, chin tilted slightly down. Defensive. Guarded. Trevor slowed his pace, stopping a few feet short of the steps. He made no move to shake hands. No broad smiles. Just a quiet nod of greeting. The kind you give a skittish animal you don't want to scare off. "Appreciate you letting me come by," Trevor said, his voice low and even. Neither of them replied immediately. A flicker passed between Ethan and Marla, an almost imperceptible glance, and for a moment Trevor wondered if they would change their minds, turn and vanish into the cabin's gloom. Finally, Ethan cleared his throat. "Didn't know who else to call," he muttered, voice rough from too many sleepless nights. Marla spoke up then, her voice sharper, like she needed to regain control of the moment. "We're not looking for attention," she said. "We're not crazy." Trevor nodded again, absorbing the layers beneath her words. The preemptive defense, the fear of being doubted, maybe even the fear that they had doubted themselves. "I'm not here to judge," Trevor said, "just to listen." The mist thickened around them, swallowing the edges of the clearing, blurring the world down to the small island of the cabin and its broken porch light. Marla glanced at Ethan again, a long, loaded look. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Trevor climbed the steps slowly, giving them every chance to change their minds. But they didn't. Inside the cabin, the air was warmer but heavy. Stale, like the place had been shut tight for weeks. The living room was small, paneled walls, an old wood stove, sagging furniture. A single overhead bulb buzzed faintly, casting thin shadow across the cracked floorboards. Ethan and Marla sat side by side on the worn couch, knees almost touching but hands kept carefully apart. Trevor pulled up a battered wooden chair across from them, set his recorder gently on the coffee table between them, and opened his notebook. He clicked the pen once, the sound sharp in the quiet. "Start wherever you want," he said. Outside, the mist pressed against the windows like a living thing. And inside, the Hartleys hesitated at the threshold of memory, torn between the terror of speaking the truth and the even deeper terror of keeping it locked inside. Chapter 3. The Night of the Static Sky. Marla spoke first. She didn't ease into it. No hesitation, no build-up. She dropped into the story like stepping into cold water. "It wasn't right," she said. "The sky, it wasn't right." Trevor said nothing, just let the silence stretch, encouraging her to fill it. Marla's eyes were fixed somewhere beyond the room, beyond the cabin walls, someplace where the air had been too still, the world too wrong. "There was no wind," she whispered. "None. Not even the trees moved. You could feel it, like everything had just stopped breathing." Ethan shifted uncomfortably beside her, but didn't interrupt. Trevor leaned forward slightly, pen ready. "Was there sound?" he asked gently. Marla shook her head, a short, brittle motion. "Nothing. No birds, no insects. Even the creek by the north tree line went silent. I thought maybe there was a storm coming, but the air wasn't heavy. It wasn't cold either. It just froze." Ethan finally spoke, his voice low, almost resentful. It was like the whole world got muted, like a static hum, but inside your head, not your ears. Trevor jotted a note. Internal static. Sensory suppression? "What time was this?" he asked. Marla answered instantly. "Just after midnight." Ethan frowned. "No, later than that. Closer to 2. A small but telling discrepancy. Trevor noted it without reacting. "And that's when you saw the light?" Marla hesitated. Ethan's jaw tightened. Outside, the mist thickened against the window glass, pressing closer. Trevor knew. They were just getting to the part where memory and fear tangled too tightly to tell apart. Chapter 4. The Arrival of the Silent Light. Marla hesitated. Ethan stared at the floor, jaw working, fighting some invisible pressure inside him. Finally, Marla found the words. "It just appeared," she said, her voice barely more than a breath. "No sound, no warning. One second the sky was black, and the next, there was this thing overhead." Trevor leaned in, his pen slowing. "What did it look like?" he asked softly. Ethan lifted his head, his eyes glassy but hard. "Big," he said. "Bigger than the cabin, bigger than the clearing. Like a wall of light just slid over us." Marla closed her eyes as if she could still see it burned into her vision. "It wasn't a beam or a spotlight," she said. "It was everything. Like the whole sky above us was replaced." Trevor imagined it, the overwhelming presence of something so large, so silent, descending over this tiny fragment of human existence. "What color?" he asked. Ethan and Marla spoke at the same time, but differently. "White," Marla said. "Silver," Ethan said. A heartbeat's pause between them. Trevor didn't correct or press them. He just wrote it down. Details diverging. Tiny cracks in the story, or in memory itself. "And the light," Trevor said. "Did it move?" Marla shook her head. "No, it just hovered, right above the cabin. Not moving, not pulsing, just there." Ethan rubbed his temples. "You couldn't look straight at it for too long," he muttered. "Felt like it was looking back." Outside, a branch scratched faintly against the misted window. Trevor barely noticed. He was too focused on the way Marla's hands were trembling now in her lap, and the way Ethan kept glancing at the window, as if afraid to see the light again. The interview was shifting. The surface memories were cracking, and something deeper, something much harder to face, was starting to seep through. Chapter 5. The Missing Minutes. The words came slower now. Marla clutched the hem of her sleeve, twisting the fabric between her fingers. Ethan sat rigid, his foot tapping an uneven beat against the cabin floor. Trevor let the silence settle, gave it weight, until Marla finally spoke. "We don't remember how it left." She sounded like she hated admitting it. "1 minute it was there, just covering everything," she said, her voice rough. "And then, nothing." Trevor scribbled a note. Perception gap? Time loss? Ethan raked his fingers through his hair, his breathing picking up. "It's like the film broke," he muttered. "You're watching a movie, then it skips. There's a flash, a stutter, and suddenly you're somewhere else." Trevor looked up sharply. "How long?" he asked. Ethan's hands balled into fists. "We don't know." Marla shook her head, eyes wide. "We went outside after. We must have." The porch was wet. The ground was muddy, like it had just rained, but it hadn't been raining when we saw the light. "And our watches were wrong," Ethan said, biting off the words. "Both of them. Mine said 3:47 a.m. Marla's said 12:19. Trevor frowned. 3.5 hours missing, but in different directions. Not simply lost time. Fragmented time. He could feel it now. The hairline fractures running through their memories, the dissonance humming just beneath their words. This wasn't just fear. It was distortion. And if Ethan and Marla couldn't even trust their own memories, then whatever had happened out there in the mist, it had gone far deeper than they realized. Outside, the forest leaned against the cabin, silent and unyielding. Somewhere in the back of Trevor's mind, a quiet certainty took root. The Hartleys hadn't simply witnessed something, they had been changed by it. Chapter 6. The Things at the Tree Line. Marla was the first to break. She spoke so quietly, Trevor had to lean in to catch it. "I saw them." Ethan stiffened beside her, his mouth tightening into a hard line. But he didn't interrupt. Trevor kept his voice low, steady. "Saw what, Marla?" She swallowed hard, her eyes flitting toward the window like she half expected to see something still waiting beyond the mist. "Shapes," she said. "Figures. Between the trees." Trevor's pen hovered just above the page. "How many?" Marla hesitated. 3, maybe 4. Ethan shifted beside her, agitated, but still said nothing. Trevor caught the movement but kept his attention on Marla. "Were they moving?" he asked. She shook her head slowly. "No, that's what made it worse. They just stood there, like they were watching, waiting." Outside, the wind picked up slightly, rattling a loose shutter against the side of the cabin. Trevor barely noticed. "What did they look like?" he pressed. Marla squeezed her arms tighter around herself. "Tall," she whispered. "Too tall. Thin. Wrong." Trevor waited. Marla's voice dropped lower, almost inaudible. "I couldn't see their faces, just the feeling. Like if I looked too long, I wouldn't be able to stop." Ethan let out a sharp breath, like he was about to argue, but then slumped forward, elbows on his knees, face buried in his hands. "I didn't see anything," he muttered, muffled. Marla flinched like he'd struck her. Trevor sat back slightly, feeling the rip between them stretch wider. Whatever they had seen, or refused to see, it was clawing at them from different angles. The figures at the tree line hadn't just been watchers, they had been a boundary, a warning, and somehow, Trevor knew, the Hartleys had already crossed it. Chapter 7. The Pressure on the Mind. Ethan finally lifted his head. His face was pale, drawn tight over his bones like a mask that barely fit. "It wasn't just outside," he said. "It was in us." Trevor kept his pen moving, but his focus sharpened. "In you how, Ethan?" Ethan struggled for the right words, his hands twitching against his knees. "It was like," he faltered, frustrated. "Like something was pushing against my thoughts. Not words, not pictures, just pressure. Like if I fought it, my head would split open." Marla stared at him, wide-eyed, as if hearing him say it aloud made it more real. Trevor nodded slowly, carefully. "Were you scared?" he asked. Ethan shook his head once, sharply. "Not scared, not exactly. It was like—" He looked at Trevor, and there was something desperate in his gaze now. "It was like they were trying to figure out how we worked, like we were open, stripped bare." Marla finally found her voice. "I felt it too," she whispered. "Not the same, but like my memories didn't belong to me anymore. Like someone else was flipping through them." Outside, a soft gust of mist brushed the window pane with a sound almost like a breath. Trevor wrote in the margin of his notebook, "Cognitive intrusion? Emotional resonance?" He looked back up at the Hartleys. "Did they take anything from you?" he asked quietly. Ethan didn't answer right away, but Marla did. "Something's missing," she said. "I don't know what, but it's gone." In the dim cabin, Trevor realized something with chilling clarity. The Hartleys hadn't been asked for permission. Whatever had reached inside them, into the raw, soft machinery of their minds, had done so without hesitation. And perhaps without understanding that it was wrong. Chapter 8. The Moment They Don't Agree On. The tension shifted subtly. No longer between Trevor and the Hartleys, but between Ethan and Marla themselves. Trevor felt it, like a cold current moving under the surface of the room. "What happened after the light disappeared?" he asked. Marla opened her mouth first. "We stayed inside," she said, quickly, firmly. "Neither of us went out. We locked the doors and stayed put until morning." Trevor turned slightly toward Ethan. The man's jaw twitched. His eyes darted to the window, then back to the floor. "I'm not sure about that," he muttered. Marla stiffened beside him, her hand curling into a fist on her knee. "You're wrong," she said sharply. "We didn't go out." Trevor stayed silent, letting the widening crack between them open on its own. Ethan rubbed his palms together, agitated, voice rising slightly. "I remember standing on the porch," he said. "I remember the wet wood under my feet. I think I looked up." He shook his head, confused. It wasn't gone. It was still there, up in the sky, but higher, like it was pulling away. Marla was already shaking her head. "No," she insisted. "We stayed inside. We didn't open the door. We didn't go out." Trevor watched them carefully. Not just what they were saying, but how. Marla's insistence felt almost rehearsed, desperate. Ethan's uncertainty was raw, searching, like a half-healed wound he kept scratching at. One clinging to denial, the other chasing something lost. Trevor leaned back slightly, scribbling a quick note. Splintered recollections, possible external influence, altered perceptions. The truth wasn't straightforward. It was fragmented, bent. Maybe by whatever had come to their cabin that night, or maybe by what had been done to them. Outside, the mist deepened into a thicker, almost metallic sheen across the window glass. Inside, the Hartleys sat side by side, worlds apart. Chapter 9. The Mark Beneath the Window. The night wore on, thick and heavy. The mist outside pressed so close against the cabin that even the porch light barely pierced it. Trevor set his pen down carefully. "Show me," he said. Ethan hesitated, exchanging another uncertain glance with Marla. But after a moment, he stood, joints stiff from sitting too long in fear and memory. Wordlessly, Trevor followed him to the back of the cabin. Ethan flipped on an old flashlight, its beam sputtering weakly through the swirling mist. They stepped outside. The cold bit immediately, damp and sharp against the skin. Trevor's boots squelched in the soft earth as they rounded the side of the cabin. The night swallowed the sound almost instantly. Ethan aimed the flashlight downward. There, directly beneath one of the bedroom windows, the ground had been disturbed. Not just footprints, not animal tracks, symbols. Trevor crouched low, the beam catching the grooves in the earth, delicate, deliberate, etched into the soft dirt with surgical precision. 3 interlocking loops, a single spiral curling outward from their center, and a sharp, almost claw-like mark slashed straight through the pattern, violent and final. Trevor didn't touch it, didn't need to. The air around the mark felt subtly wrong, thicker, like static clinging to the mist. He pulled out his phone and snapped a few pictures, but even through the lens, the symbol seemed to blur at the edges, like it refused to be captured. "What is it?" Ethan asked, voice low and hoarse. Trevor shook his head slowly. "I don't know." But deep inside, he felt it wasn't just a message, it was a claim. Something had been left behind. A sign. A tether. And Trevor understood, in the marrow of his bones, whatever had visited the Hartleys wasn't finished with them. Not yet. Chapter 10. The Dreams They Can't Wake. From back inside the cabin, the air felt even heavier, thick with the damp chill that clung to Trevor's jacket and the unease that never seemed to lift. Ethan and Marla sat together on the couch again, but the distance between them now felt enormous, like two castaways clinging to separate pieces of wreckage. Trevor leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about the dreams," he said. Neither of them spoke at first. The fire in the wood stove popped softly in the background, a brittle, too loud sound in the silence. Finally, Marla found the courage. "They're not dreams," she said. "They're memories we're not supposed to have." Trevor stayed very still, letting her unravel it in her own time. "I wake up floating," she whispered. "Every night. Not lying down, floating. I can feel it. The cold against my skin. The humming. Everywhere." Ethan nodded slowly, his gaze locked on some invisible point beyond the cabin walls. "Same for me," he muttered. "But it's not just floating. It's being studied, watched, like we're laid out on a table under a white light, like we don't even matter." Trevor scribbled a single word in his notebook. "Clinical." "And the eyes," Marla said, her voice cracking. Trevor looked up sharply. Marla's hands twisted in her lap. "There are eyes watching. Not human, not angry, not curious either. Just cold, like we're nothing but data to them." Ethan's fingers tightened around the edge of the couch cushion until his knuckles turned white. "I hear voices sometimes," he said. "But they're not words, just impressions, like questions pushed into your head." Outside, the mist scraped gently against the windows like ghostly fingernails. Inside, Trevor could feel it, the slow, inexorable weight of whatever had touched the Hartleys. It hadn't just taken their time. It had taken root. And every night when they closed their eyes, it pulled them back, again and again, into the place they could never quite leave. Chapter 11. The Fear of the Return. The hour grew late, but none of them moved toward sleep. Trevor sat back in his chair, watching the Hartleys carefully. Their eyes flicked constantly toward the window, toward the walls, as if expecting the mist itself to peel open and reveal something waiting beyond. Marla hugged her knees up onto the couch, her voice brittle when she finally spoke. "It's not over." Trevor stayed still. Marla's gaze locked onto his, desperate to be believed. "Every night, 3:13 a.m., she said. "I wake up. I don't even hear anything. I just know. It's out there. Waiting." Ethan scrubbed a hand over his face, exhausted. "Same for me," he muttered. "Even when I don't remember dreaming, I still wake up at 3:13 every damn night." Trevor frowned slightly, pen tapping against his notebook. "Have you seen anything since?" he asked. Marla nodded once, a small, terrified motion. "Light," she whispered, "way back through the trees. Just a faint glow, like something still looking." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "I thought it was just my mind playing tricks," he said. "But sometimes I see movement, shadows, things that aren't there when you look straight at them." Trevor wrote a single word in the margin. Persistent presence. He looked up again. "You're scared it's coming back," he said, voice quiet. Marla didn't answer. She didn't need to. The terror was etched into every line of her face. Outside, the mist thickened, pushing against the windows like a living thing. The clock on the wall ticked softly, each second a heartbeat in the suffocating quiet. And deep in the woods beyond the clearing, somewhere just past sight, something unseen, something patient, waited for the right moment. The Hartleys weren't just survivors. They were unfinished business. Chapter 12. The Unfinished Encounter. Trevor sat quietly, letting the seconds stretch out. The Hartleys were exhausted, bone-deep, soul-deep, exhausted. But underneath the fatigue, he could sense it, the gnawing edge of something unresolved, something unfinished. "Do you think," Trevor asked carefully, "that night was the end of it?" Neither answered immediately. The clock ticked on the wall. The fire cracked and popped. Finally, Ethan spoke, voice rough and low. "No." Trevor nodded once, encouraging him. "I don't think it ever left," Ethan said. "I think it's still here, watching." Marla hugged her knees tighter. "Sometimes," she whispered, "I'll look outside, and I'll see the trees bending, just slightly, like something's moving between them, but when you blink, it's gone." Trevor jotted down 2 words: residual presence. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You think they marked you?" It wasn't really a question. Marla stared at the window. "I don't think we ever had a choice." Outside, the mist thickened. The faint glow deep in the woods pulsing once, almost imperceptibly. Trevor didn't believe in coincidences, and he didn't believe the Hartleys were alone. Whatever had visited them that night, it hadn't been a simple encounter. It was a doorway, one they hadn't realized they'd stepped through, and whatever was on the other side, it was still reaching, still pulling, still waiting. Chapter 13. Shadows over the cabin. Trevor didn't stay long after the interview wound down. There was nothing left to say. Ethan and Marla were hollowed out by the telling, their bodies sagging into the worn couch, their eyes distant, as if already slipping into some inner country where no comfort could follow. Trevor packed up his notebook and recorder, tucking them neatly into his battered satchel. He didn't press them further. He didn't offer empty reassurances. Some truths, once spoken aloud, needed no commentary. The mist had thickened to a dense wall by the time he stepped outside, wrapping the cabin in a gauzy cocoon of damp silence. The porch light flickered behind him, sputtering against the tide of darkness. Trevor walked slowly back to his truck, gravel crunching underfoot, every sound muffled into near nothingness. He paused once at the edge of the clearing, hand on the door handle, instinct prickling along the back of his neck. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their outlines swallowed by the mist. The cabin behind him was a faint, flickering glow, the last fragile island of warmth in a sea of cold uncertainty. Trevor opened the truck door and slid inside, the leather seat creaking beneath him. The engine turned over with a reluctant growl. As he eased onto the gravel road, headlights cutting twin tunnels through the gray, he risked one last glance in the rearview mirror. At first, there was nothing, just mist. And then, a faint, silver light, moving just above the treetops. Silent, watching, following. Trevor tightened his grip on the steering wheel, forcing himself to focus on the winding road ahead. The Hartleys' story wasn't finished, and maybe, just maybe, neither was his. The mist closed in behind him, swallowing the clearing, the cabin, and the fragile, trembling human lives within. Somewhere beyond the trees, something unseen drifted in the dark. Patient, endless, waiting.